Hi, Tracy Tyson. I'm a pediatrician in Vermont, and I wanted to talk about sleep in preteens and teens. This is a really big problem. I'm sure every parent that is watching this that has a preteen or a teen can agree, and a lot that surprisingly we feel pretty helpless with as parents. So I wanted to give you some tips and tricks and statistics and things that might help at home. So first of all, right now, only 25% of US preteens and teens are getting enough sleep, and that is not near enough. And we are seeing the effects of that in our office with increased physical complaints, headaches, abdominal pain, anxiety and depression, trouble in school, mental health concerns, and we're really noticing a big impact on our children's overall health. And so much of this is related to the devices. So let's talk about what's healthy for a child, what is recommended, and what are some things that you can do if this is already going wrong in your own household. What are some ways that you can reset the clock? So first and foremost, no cell phone for children under the age of 13. The American Academy of Pediatrics has been pretty adamant that the studies show that it is not, there's no benefit prior to the age of 13, and probably there isn't a benefit for any of us, but under 13, there's definitely a huge ramifications in health in kids. So just make that a rule in your family, no cell phones until after the age of 13. You can decide after 13 if you even still want to give one, but that's a pretty good place to start. However, there are so many other electronic devices that are causing an issue. Video games are a huge problem. Smart iPads, televisions, all of those things that allow your child to interact with it on a regular basis, whether that's playing constantly or scrolling, whether it's YouTube or TikTok or even just Netflix, where they're in a streaming service where they can watch one thing after another. Why is this such a bigger problem than just watching television or reading or doing art? Why is it affecting children's sleep so much? And we think this is related to dopamine. So dopamine is a chemical that's released from your brain when it wants you to enjoy something. And so usually it's reserved for something that's really healthy for you. So you bite into an apple and it's really juicy and delicious and you get actually a happy feeling because your brain knows that you need more of this, and so it's trying to give you that happy feeling so that you'll do it more. When you laugh with a friend, when you see a beautiful sunset, when you have a lot of physical activity and your heart is pounding, you're going to release some extra dopamine so that you feel good about it, so that you want to do it more. With electronic devices, it is tenfold. There's so much more dopamine released, and so the child and adult is getting so much happier chemicals by doing this that eventually the real world starts to not feel very good anymore, and it's extremely addictive, as we all know. So any kind of device that your child can go from one thing to another and constantly interact with is going to have some addictive properties. And the closer that they do it to sleep time, the worse that's going to be. So what are our recommendations? No electronic devices for an hour before sleep. We really recommend as minimal during the day. Children are on computers all day long at school. And so when they get home, we want them to interact in other ways, right? We want them to be physically active. We want them to use their creativity. We want them to use their fine motor skills for something else. And we want them to get healthy amounts of dopamine. And so really in general, just setting up a routine in your home, especially during the weeknights where there is really limited time for electronics. And if there is time and it is something that you allow in your household, putting some very specific restrictions, start and stop times. What is the child allowed to do? How long are they allowed to do it for? And then watch your child. Sometimes children can have no electronic devices. That is the only thing that's helpful for them. And other children can have a little bit. It really just depends on the kid. And as hard as you think it might be to remove them, almost every family that I have had, including in my own family, where I've had to make some complete reductions in screen time, it has always been easier than you thought. And the child has actually had huge improvements in so many areas when it's been done. So lots of restrictions, pay attention to what they're using, and nothing an hour before sleep. So not allowing the child to take the electronic device, whether that's video game console, television, smartphone, iPad, any of those things in their room. So when it's time to go to sleep, let's stop everything that we're doing, coming up with a specific routine to tell the brain, hey, we're not going to try to go to sleep. We're not just laying in the bed watching Netflix. So that's one of the things I tell my teens is put the phone on charge. If it's a preteen, it needs to be charged in a central location. Away from you, go do a routine to reset yourself. For some people, that's a late shower. We know warm showers can kind of release some sleepy chemicals to make the child feel a little bit more sleepy. And it's also kind of a starting point, right? It's kind of saying, oh, we're going into a different routine. And the brain really likes that. So sometimes taking a later shower, brushing the teeth, laying out the clothes for the night before, drinking something warm. It doesn't necessarily matter what it is. I think some of the studies were done in like chamomile tea or warmed milk, but anything warmed can kind of, again, release some of those happy chemicals, fill up the belly, and make the person more tired. Some people like to use magnesium supplements, which, as far as we know, are perfectly safe to use on a regular basis and do help some people sleep a little bit more deeply. Melatonin is something that can be used very short term and temporary when you're trying to reset a routine. So if you're having a child and you're trying to get them back to healthy sleep, you can sometimes use melatonin at the lowest dose that will work for short term while you're working on all of the other patterns, and then try to remove it as quickly as possible. If they're needing it longer than 2 weeks, it is something to talk to your pediatrician about, because there might be something else going on. I do prescribe sometimes melatonin for children for sleep, but it's for very specific issues when nothing else is working. So trying some of those routine in your home, and get your kids buy-in. Talk to them about the fact of how important this is. Show them healthy sleeping habits in yourself and routine, and you can do this a little bit slow. So what do you do if the wheels are already off the bus and it's terrible, and your teen is not falling asleep until 1 o'clock in the morning, and they're hard to get up in the morning, and they're missing school? And sadly, I hear this all the time, and there are some things that you can do. I think the first thing is expecting the child to then go to bed at 9 o'clock at night when they've only been falling asleep at 1 a.m. is really unrealistic. So that's where we all go wrong, is we try to reset this too fast. So having a conversation with your preteen or teen about how we can slowly make this work. And what I usually recommend for people is backing it up by about an hour every few nights, to try to slowly get the brain a little bit more used to going to sleep earlier. So say your teen is not falling asleep till 1 o'clock in the morning. Let's start our bedtime routine at like 11. And then by midnight, hopefully the child is then falling asleep for a few nights, still getting up early in the morning, so they're still not quite getting enough sleep. And then in a few nights, backing it up another hour, like slowly getting where you need to go. We can't go from 0 to 60. We can't expect to be up until, 1 o'clock in the morning, and then the night before school starting, in bed at 9. It's just not going to work, and everyone's going to be miserable. Again, putting the expectations on the devices and setting it up as early as you can. If it's already gone wrong in your home, then have, again, a very respectful conversation with your teenager. Talk to them about why you're doing what you're doing, what those restrictions are going to be, and allowing it to maybe come on a little bit slower. A whole different conversation, but if your teen is really adamant that this is not going to happen, you might need to reset it completely where there aren't any electronics for a little bit of time, and then allowing those things to kind of be earned back when they buy into the routine. Again, whole different conversation. This is mostly for the kid who's willing to work with you a little bit. So remembering limited devices, putting restrictions on them, they're not in the child's room, starting a bedtime routine 1 hour before expecting them to fall asleep, and not expecting it to happen too quickly. Allowing it to be about an hour a night is going to give the child the best success. Not allowing too much restrictions or too much change in this on the weekend. So making sure that they're not then resetting everything on the weekend and you have to start again every Sunday night. So keeping close to the same schedule during the weekend is going to be helpful, and honestly much better for your child's health overall. So let's really focus on prioritizing our kids' sleep. If we want to talk about making kids healthy, let's get them enough sleep so that we can really set them out for their best next day. And I'll talk a little bit more about sleep disorders at a later date, but this is just something to kind of get you going if you're curious. I hope you have a great day. Get some sleep. Happy back to school.